Nolan Ellis had $32 to his name, a 3-year-old daughter who refused to eat anything but dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets, and grease on his jeans from another long shift at the garage. So when a woman in a navy pencil skirt accidentally dropped her keys on the sidewalk in front of the downtown cafe, he didn't think twice. He jogged up behind her, keys in hand, and tapped her on the shoulder. "Hey, you dropped these," he said, slightly out of breath. She turned, her eyes sharp and startled. Her lips parted like she was about to speak and forgot how. She was beautiful, the kind of beautiful that came with glossy heels and designer perfume. Definitely not from this side of town. "Oh," she said, blinking. "Thank you." "No problem." He handed them over and gave a quick nod. "Have a good day." She stared at him for a second longer than he expected. "Wait." He paused, brows raised. The woman gave a shaky laugh. "Sorry, it's been a day. I have a meeting in 5 minutes and I already spilled coffee on my blouse this morning. Yikes." "Hope the rest of it turns around," he said, offering a small smile before turning back toward his car, the beat-up blue sedan with a car seat in the back and duct tape holding the side mirror together. She hesitated, watching him go. But then her phone buzzed and she was gone. 3 days later, Nolan was elbow-deep in an oil change when his daughter, Grace, ran into the garage office waving something in her tiny hands. "Daddy, look, I drawed you a car." He wiped his hands on a rag and crouched. "You did? Oh wow, that's the nicest car I've ever seen. It's purple. Like a unicorn." "Of course it is." That's when the sleek black SUV pulled up out front, definitely not a regular customer vehicle. Nolan stood, squinting as the door opened and the same woman from the cafe stepped out, this time in jeans and a white blazer. Still stunning. Still out of place. She walked straight toward him. "Hi," she said. "Hey, did your car break down?" "No. I was hoping you were here. I remembered your face." He frowned, confused. "From the cafe?" "Yeah. You picked up my keys." She looked down, suddenly a little nervous. "I just wanted to thank you properly. I was a mess that day." "You really don't have to, I insist," she said, pulling out a small bag from the SUV. "It's just coffee and a muffin." He blinked. "You brought me breakfast?" "Well, technically lunch. It's noon." He chuckled, taking the bag. "Thanks. That's really kind of you. I'm Bianca Owens." She extended her hand. "Nolan Ellis." He shook it. Her grip was firm, her skin soft. "This is Grace." Grace peeked out from behind his leg and gave a tiny wave. "Hi, Grace," Bianca said, crouching down. "That's a beautiful drawing you made." "Thank you," Grace said proudly. "It's a unicorn car." Bianca smiled, then stood. "She's adorable. She's my whole world." Something flickered across Bianca's face, then something soft and almost sad, but it passed quickly. "Well, I won't keep you. I just wanted to say thank you. You didn't have to drive across town for that." "I wanted to," she said. "Most people don't even say excuse me anymore. You chased me down to give me my keys." He shrugged. Didn't feel like a heroic act. To me, it kind of was. 2 weeks passed, and then another black SUV pulled up outside the garage. Bianca stepped out again, this time in a red blouse and jeans, holding 2 coffees. "I figured you wouldn't mind some caffeine," she said. Nolan blinked. "This is the 3rd time you've come by. Is there a limit?" He laughed. "No, but I'm starting to think you just like the smell of motor oil." She grinned. "I like the company." That afternoon, they shared coffee on the bench behind the garage while Grace played with chalk on the pavement. Bianca asked about his job, his life, what it was like raising his daughter alone. He told her about losing Grace's mom to cancer when Grace was still a baby, about how he worked 2 jobs until he saved enough to open the small garage. And when he asked about her, Bianca was vague. "I run a company. Lots of meetings. Lots of paperwork." He didn't press. He didn't need to know every detail to know he liked being around her. 3 more visits. Then 5. Then she brought Grace a stuffed unicorn and sat on the greasy bench like it was a throne. Then she brought Nolan a sandwich and called him out for skipping lunch. Then she stayed and helped Grace draw a rainbow across the garage floor with sidewalk chalk. And one night, after Grace had fallen asleep in his arms and he'd carried her inside and tucked her in, he came back out and found Bianca still sitting on the bench, watching the stars. "You don't really belong here," he said quietly. She looked at him. "Why?" "Because I wear heels and drink overpriced coffee. Because you've got something better to do than hang out at a garage with a single dad." She looked at him for a long time. "What if I don't?" He didn't have an answer for that. So she stood and stepped closer. You don't know who I am, do you? He blinked. Should I? I'm the CEO of Owens Tech, the 20-story building downtown with the giant silver O on it. He stared. I liked that you didn't know. I liked how you looked at me like I'm a person, not a job title. He let out a shaky breath. And yet you kept coming back. I wanted to. She paused. I still do. He took a step closer. This, whatever this is, can't be real. Why not? Because you're a CEO? And I change brake pads for a living. Bianca reached up, brushing dirt from his cheek. You're a good dad. You're kind. Honest. Real. That's worth more than any boardroom full of suits. He stared at her, heartbeat wild. And then, finally, he said, I want to kiss you. Her lips curved slightly. Then do it. So he did. And everything changed. The rain had started somewhere between Grace falling asleep and Bianca quietly helping Nolan tidy up the garage. She didn't flinch when the first drops landed on her blazer. Instead, she tilted her face to the sky like it had been too long since she'd let herself feel anything that wasn't calculated or scheduled. Nolan noticed. You're going to ruin those shoes. They're just shoes, she said, not moving. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. That's not something I expected to hear from you. I wasn't always in stilettos and boardrooms. She turned slightly, her expression unreadable. I used to live in a 2-bedroom apartment over a laundromat in Jersey. My mom worked nights. I'd wait up and watch the door till she came home. He hadn't asked for her past, but he didn't interrupt. She was finally giving him a piece of it, and he wasn't going to waste it. I learned early how to act like I belonged in places I didn't, she continued. Eventually, I stopped realizing I was pretending. Is that what this is? He asked. Pretending. She blinked, then looked at him fully. No. That's the problem. The tension between them was different now, thicker, heavier, but not uncomfortable. Like something unspoken had finally started to show itself. I told my assistant I was in back-to-back meetings all afternoon, she said, stepping back under the awning. I didn't want to explain why I'd rather be here. Nolan tilted his head. What would you say if you had to? That I like the way this place smells like real work. That your daughter draws better unicorns than any overpriced art in my penthouse. That when I talk to you, I don't have to think 3 steps ahead. He shook his head slowly. You're not supposed to say things like that. Why not? Because I don't know what to do with them. Bianca's gaze dropped to the pavement. Maybe I don't either. Inside, Grace stirred on the couch Nolan had cleaned up for her earlier. The baby monitor buzzed faintly in the background. He glanced toward the door. Stay for dinner, he said without thinking. She hesitated. Are you sure? I've got 1 box of spaghetti and half a jar of sauce. It's not exactly fine dining. I'm not here for fine dining, she said, brushing the rain from her sleeve. She helped him boil water, her jacket draped over the back of a chair, her hair pulled into a loose knot. Grace woke up halfway through and groggily asked if Bianca could sit next to her. She did, with no hesitation. By the time the plates were clean and the leftovers what little there were packed, it felt like they'd all done this 100 times before. When Bianca finally stood to leave, Grace clung to her legs. Will you come back tomorrow? She asked, voice muffled in Bianca's coat. Bianca looked at Nolan. If it's okay. He nodded, his throat tight. That night after Grace went to sleep and the dishes dried on the counter, Nolan sat alone on the back step and tried to make sense of it all. Not just Bianca's visits, but the way she looked at him like he wasn't invisible. Like he wasn't just surviving. Like he mattered. The next morning, she didn't show up. Not by noon. Not by dusk. No text. No call. Not even the quiet hum of that black SUV pulling up to the curb. Nolan tried not to think anything of it. People got busy. She was a CEO. She probably had a dozen emergencies to handle. But still, something felt off. Grace noticed too. Maybe she got sick. She offered hopefully over cereal. Maybe, Nolan said, though he didn't believe it. The next day passed. Then another. On the 4th day, he couldn't take it anymore. He stood outside the towering Owens Tech building, feeling wildly out of place in his faded jeans and oil-stained boots. The security guard at the front desk gave him a skeptical once-over. I'm here to see Bianca Owens, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Do you have an appointment? No, but then I'm afraid I can't let you pass the lobby. Before he could argue, a sleek woman in a navy suit stepped off the elevator, her expression tight and impatient. Ellis, she said. Nolan turned. Come with me, she said briskly. She's not taking visitors, but she left instructions if you ever came. He followed her through a maze of polished hallways, the kind that echoed every footstep. Finally, she stopped at a door with frosted glass and handed him a slim envelope. She asked me to give you this. That's all I know. The door shut behind her with a click. Nolan stared at the envelope for a long moment before opening it. Inside was a folded piece of stationery with her handwriting, neat and deliberate. Nolan, I didn't mean for things to go that far. I let myself forget that I don't belong in your world and you don't belong in mine, not because you're not good enough, but because I'm not strong enough. I thought I could have both my life and something real, but I was wrong. You deserve someone who can be there without hiding or apologizing. I can't ask you to wait while I figure out how to stop running from my own life. I care about you. I care about Grace. That's why I have to stop this before it becomes something I can't undo. Please don't come looking for me again. B read it 3 times before folding it and sliding it back into the envelope. The receptionist gave him a sympathetic look as he passed, but he barely saw her. By the time he got home, Grace was coloring at the kitchen table. Did you find her? She asked. He knelt beside her, swallowing hard. No, baby. She's not coming back. Grace frowned. But she said she would. I know, Nolan said softly. Sometimes grown-ups break promises, even when they don't want to. Grace didn't say anything. She just reached for his hand and held it. That night, Nolan lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how something that had never felt like a fantasy could still vanish like one. The garage felt quieter without her. Not in the obvious way, not in the kind of silence that came from missing footsteps or idle chatter, but in the way Nolan noticed the air didn't shift anymore when the front door opened. Every time a car pulled into the lot, he looked up instinctively, only to find another customer, another job, another reminder that she hadn't come back. 3 weeks passed. He stopped expecting anything different. Grace adjusted faster than he did. Kids were like that. She still asked about Bianca sometimes, but less and less. He answered her gently, always honest, never bitter. He couldn't afford bitterness. Not when bills were due and rent was late and dinner sometimes depended on which aisle was on sale. But even when he wasn't thinking about her, he was thinking about her. He thought about the way she had tied her hair up with a pin when she helped organize the cluttered shelf in the garage office. He thought about how she had traced the rim of her coffee cup whenever she was nervous. He thought about how she'd looked at him during that first kiss like he wasn't just some man fixing cars, but someone she couldn't look away from. Then, one Thursday morning, a man in a tailored trench coat stepped into the shop. Nolan glanced up from underneath a lifted hood, wiping his hands on a towel. Can I help you? You're Mr. Ellis? The man asked, glancing around the garage like it offended him. Yeah. The man pulled a slim envelope from inside his coat and held it out. This is for you. Nolan stared at it, already recognizing the handwriting. His breath caught in his chest. The man gave a stiff nod and walked out without another word. Nolan didn't move for a moment. Then he pulled the envelope open, heart hammering. There was no letter, just a business card, clean and ivory white, with nothing on it but a name, Bianca Owens, and scratched hastily on the back in blue ink one sentence. Come to the Muirwood Hotel tonight. Room 634. He read it twice, then tucked it into his back pocket like it might vanish if he let go. That evening, he called the only babysitter in town who didn't charge more than he could afford and scrambled to find something clean that didn't smell like engine grease. He settled on the one collared shirt he owned that still had all its buttons and a pair of black pants he hadn't worn since Grace's last school picture day. The Muirwood was a world apart from anywhere he'd ever been. Marble floors, gold elevator doors, a chandelier big enough to crash through 3 floors if it ever fell. He tried not to look like he belonged nowhere near it as he stepped into the elevator, the card burning in his pocket. When he knocked, the door opened almost immediately. Bianca stood there barefoot, wearing a simple satin robe the color of champagne. No makeup, no jewelry, just her. You came, she said softly. You asked. She stepped back, letting the door swing wider. He entered slowly, glancing around the suite. It was as extravagant as he'd imagined: curved windows, velvet chairs, a bottle of wine uncorked on the table. But none of it mattered. Not next to her. I wasn't sure if I should, he said finally. I wasn't sure if I should ask. He turned toward her. Why now? She sat on the edge of the chaise near the window, folding her hands in her lap. Because I've spent every day since walking away wondering if I made the biggest mistake of my life. I read your note. You said you couldn't ask me to wait. I know, she said, looking down. But I hoped you might have. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm not the kind of guy who fits into your world. No, she said. You're the kind of guy who makes me question why I ever wanted to fit into it in the first place. He didn't speak. He couldn't. She was unraveling in front of him, and he didn't know if he was supposed to catch her or let her fall. I was scared, she said. Not of you. Of what it would mean if I let myself have something real. Every part of my life has been built on control, on structure. And then you came along with your daughter and your quiet strength and your stupid unicorn drawings, and suddenly I didn't know who I was anymore. Nolan crossed the room slowly. You could have just told me that. I didn't know how, she whispered. He reached her, crouching so they were eye level. You don't get to disappear because you're afraid. That's not how this works. I'm not disappearing now, she said, voice shaking. I'm here. I'm asking you to let me try again. No secrets. No hiding. Just us. He studied her. The vulnerability in her eyes. The slight tremble in her hands. The truth was she had never looked more powerful than in that moment. I didn't wait because of hope, he said. I waited because nothing else felt right without you. Bianca's breath caught. But this time, he added, you don't get to walk away. I won't. He stood and offered her his hand. Then come back with me. She looked up. To the garage? To my life, he said. It's messy and small and loud, but it's real. Grace keeps a toothbrush in the glove box. The kitchen sink leaks. And the couch smells like crayons. But if you can handle all that, then yeah. Come back. She slipped her fingers into his, standing slowly. That's all I've wanted. He pulled her into his arms, and this kiss wasn't about longing or confusion. It was about choosing. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I had a meeting scheduled tomorrow morning in Tokyo. Are you going? I just canceled it, she said. I've got more important things to do. Like what? She smiled for real, the kind that reached her eyes. Meet your daughter at breakfast. Nolan's hand slid to her waist. She's going to make you eat cereal with marshmallows. I'll survive. And for the first time in weeks, Nolan felt like maybe they would. The morning sun caught on the cracked glass of the kitchen window as Bianca stood barefoot on the faded linoleum floor, staring down at the toaster like it might betray her at any moment. The garage apartment smelled faintly of burnt toast and cinnamon from the cereal Grace had spilled earlier, leaving a trail of sugary crumbs across the counter. Nolan leaned against the frame of the open door, arms crossed, watching her with quiet amusement. You know, he said, you don't have to wage war with the toaster. It's just a piece of metal. Bianca narrowed her eyes at the machine. It ate my bread. Twice. It's not personal. It does that to everyone. She turned toward him. That's not comforting. He stepped forward, reaching past her to pop the lever and retrieve the slightly charred slice. Here. Toasted on one side. Perfect for someone who's only half committed to breakfast. You're enjoying this, aren't you? A little bit. She took the toast with a sigh and glanced at the wall clock. I have a call with Zurich in 20 minutes, but I rescheduled the Berlin check-in. I told them I was prioritizing something more important. Nolan raised a brow. You really told your board that? I told them I'd be managing a high-value long-term investment. Technically, not a lie. Grace and I are flattered to be part of your portfolio. Bianca took a bite of her toast and smiled. I've never had to fight so hard to make time for something that felt this easy. From the next room, Grace's laughter rang out as she played with the set of plastic dinosaurs Nolan had picked up from a garage sale 2 weeks ago. Bianca set the toast down and walked to the doorway, leaning just enough to see her. You think she's adjusting? She asked without looking back. She's 5. All she needs is consistency and someone to listen to her dinosaur stories. You're already halfway there. Bianca turned. And the other half? Let her pick the bedtime story, even when it's the longest one. There was a knock at the door. Nolan frowned, wiping his hands on a towel as he crossed the room. A delivery man stood on the porch, holding a long black case with gold clasps and a clipboard. Mr. Ellis? Yeah. Signature, please. Nolan signed, nodded his thanks, and took the case inside. Bianca had straightened, watching him with cautious curiosity. What is it? He placed it on the table and opened it. Inside lay a full set of high-end mechanics tools, chrome finished, perfectly arranged in precision-cut foam. Every piece gleamed under the kitchen light. He stared for a long moment. These cost more than my car. There's a card, Bianca said softly. He found it tucked beneath the top flap. It read, for the hands that make things run. from someone who finally understands what it means to build something real. Nolan looked at her. This is from you? She nodded. I know you wouldn't take money, but I've seen what you do with tools that barely hold together. You deserve the best, Nolan. He hesitated. This isn't about charity? No. It's about belief. He closed the case gently and stepped closer. You're not afraid anymore? I'm terrified, she said, meeting his eyes. But I'm not running. He pulled her in, his hands settling at her waist. Good. That night, Bianca tucked Grace into bed for the first time. The girl nestled into her pillow, clutching her favorite stuffed dinosaur with one hand and Bianca's fingers with the other. Will you still be here tomorrow? Grace asked sleepily. Bianca brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. Every day I can be. Grace nodded, as if that answer was enough. Later, Nolan stood beside her on the back steps, both of them watching the streetlights flicker on down the road. The night air carried the scent of cut grass and something sweet from the neighbor's garden. You really canceled Zurich and Berlin? He asked. I also turned down an invitation to speak at an international tech summit in Singapore. He turned to her, surprised. Why? I was tired of giving speeches to people who only listen because they expect something from me. You and Grace. You just listen. He exhaled slowly. I never expected any of this. Neither did I, she said. I dropped a set of keys and found a life I didn't know I was missing. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. I'm not good at grand things, he said. No rooftop dinners or surprise yachts. You fixed the heater in Grace's room the same night it broke. That's just being a dad. That's everything, she whispered. A week later, the garage held its soft reopening under a new name, Ellis & Owens Auto. A new sign gleamed above the entrance, and a small crowd of neighbors and loyal customers gathered for the ribbon cutting. Grace held the scissors with Bianca's help, giggling as the ribbon fluttered to the ground. Nolan stood beside them, his hand resting lightly on Bianca's back. As the applause died down, a reporter from the local paper approached with a camera. Mind if we get a photo of the owners? She asked. Nolan hesitated, glancing at Bianca. She smiled. I think we can manage that. Grace slipped between them, holding both their hands. The camera clicked, capturing the three of them in a frame that already felt like forever. That night, they returned home, tired but content. Grace fell asleep on the couch halfway through her third bedtime story. Bianca carried her to bed with ease, and Nolan followed, watching quietly as she adjusted the blanket around the girl's small frame. When she turned, he pulled her into his arms. You're staying? He asked quietly. She leaned her head against his chest. I'm home. They stood like that for a long time. No gala. No headlines. Just the hum of a quiet house and the steady rhythm of something real being built between them. And for the first time in a long time, Nolan Ellis believed he hadn't been foolish to hope. The invitation arrived on a Thursday morning, hand-delivered in a silver envelope with embossed calligraphy. Bianca opened it at the breakfast table, still wearing one of Nolan's old t-shirts, as Grace recited the names of all the dinosaurs she'd taped to the fridge. She read it, set it down, then picked it up again. You've gone very quiet, Nolan said from the stove, flipping pancakes with one hand and pouring juice with the other. It's from the Owens Foundation, she said slowly. They're hosting their annual gala next weekend. Apparently, I'm expected to attend. You're still on the board? Chairwoman, technically. Though I haven't stepped foot in that building since I left. Grace tugged on Bianca's sleeve. What's a gala? It's a very big party, with fancy dresses and too many speeches, Bianca explained. Boring, Grace declared, already turning her attention back to her coloring book. Bianca glanced up at Nolan. Would you come with me? He paused, spatula midair. To a gala? With tuxedos and champagne flutes? Yes. I'd need shoes that don't have steel toes. I'll handle that. He turned back to the stove. You really want to walk into that world again? I want to walk into it with you. Nolan didn't respond right away. The only sound between them was the sizzle of batter and Grace humming under her breath. Then he said, All right. But I'm not learning how to waltz. I wasn't going to ask. The following week passed in a blur of last-minute fittings and whispered plans after Grace had gone to sleep. Bianca arranged everything. A sleek black tuxedo that fit Nolan like it had been made for him, a deep emerald gown for herself that shimmered under the light, and a babysitter who came highly recommended by Nolan's neighbor. On the night of the gala, as Bianca fastened the final clasp of her necklace in the mirror, Nolan stepped into the room behind her, adjusting his cufflinks with a subtle frown. You sure this thing's not too much? He asked, tugging at the lapel. Bianca turned, her eyes sweeping over him slowly. You look like every woman in that ballroom's fantasy. I'd rather look like yours. You already do. They arrived at the Grand Marlowe Hotel just after 7. A valet took Nolan's borrowed car without flinching, though Nolan shot Bianca a look that said he was certain it would come back with a scratch. She squeezed his hand as they stepped through the gilded entrance. Inside, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and crystal glassware. A string quartet played in the corner, and servers glided past with silver trays. Within moments, heads turned. Whispers followed. Bianca didn't flinch. She walked forward with Nolan beside her, her chin high, her hand resting lightly on his arm. A man in a navy suit approached, his expression carefully measured. Bianca, I wasn't sure you'd actually attend. I said I might, she replied coolly. And now I have. Nolan watched the exchange silently. The man's eyes flicked toward him, assessing, but Nolan didn't look away. This must be your... Yes, the man said. Partner, Bianca corrected, without hesitation. Nolan Ellis. The man gave a tight nod, then excused himself. Nolan leaned in. Friend of yours? Ex-fiancé, she said with a small shrug. He expected me to take over the family business and marry him in the same quarter. I assume you didn't. I preferred building my own empire. Over the next hour, they navigated the room together. Bianca introduced Nolan to people who had once only known her as a headline or a quarterly report. She didn't explain who he was beyond what mattered. He wasn't a mechanic. He wasn't a single father. He was the man she loved. And eventually, that was all anyone saw. Later, as the music shifted to a slower tempo, Bianca looked up from her champagne. Dance with me. I warned you. No waltzing. Then don't waltz. Just hold me. He took her hand, and they stepped onto the floor. The music wrapped around them like velvet, and as they moved, she rested her head against his shoulder. I used to think this world was everything, she murmured. And now, I'd trade every chandelier in this room for one more night on that garage bench. You're not losing it, he said. You brought it with you. She looked up at him. You think this is real, don't you? I know it is, because I was fine before. And now I can't imagine waking up without hearing your voice. Her eyes softened. That's the kind of thing you say right before you ask something big. He held her gaze. Marry me. She blinked. What? Not tomorrow. Not next week. But soon. No press. No ballroom. Just you, me, Grace, and a life that makes sense. Bianca laughed, not out of disbelief, but from something deeper. Joy. Freedom. Relief. Yes, she whispered. Of course, yes. They didn't notice the room around them. Didn't care when the music changed or the lights dimmed. In that moment, the only thing that mattered was the promise between them. 3 months later, Bianca walked barefoot through the backyard Nolan had slowly turned into something beautiful. String lights hung between the trees. Grace chased Bubbles with 2 cousins she'd adopted as her own. A makeshift altar stood under the old oak tree, draped in linen Nolan's sister had sewn herself. Bianca wore a simple white dress. Nolan wore the same tuxedo from the gala. Grace stood between them, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. The ceremony was short, honest, beautiful in its simplicity. When the officiant asked for vows, Nolan spoke first. I don't have poetry, he said. I just have the truth. You walked into my life like a storm I didn't see coming. And somehow, in the middle of everything broken, you made it feel whole again. I promise to always hold on to that. And to you. Bianca's voice trembled only slightly. I spent years building walls so no one could see how lonely it was behind them. Then you handed me a wrench and asked if I wanted to stay. You didn't fix me. You just gave me enough space to fix myself. I promised to never stop choosing you. Grace handed them the rings. When they kissed, the backyard erupted in cheers. Later, as the stars filled the sky and the last slice of cake disappeared, Nolan carried a sleepy Grace upstairs, Bianca trailing behind him. She paused at the doorway, watching him tuck their daughter into bed. Their daughter. That's what it felt like now. The 3 of them weren't a patchwork, they were a picture finally complete. When Nolan turned, Bianca reached for his hand. Still think you don't belong in my world? She whispered. He kissed her knuckles. No. I think we made a new one. And in the quiet that followed, just the hum of crickets outside, the soft breath of a sleeping child, and the warmth of 2 hearts finally home, they stepped into their forever. Together.